Oh, so the solution was the solution's called balanced job complexes. And that's the third institution. So the third institution of participatory economics, we have self-managing workers and consumers councils, equitable remuneration, and now we have balanced job complexes, which changes the division of labor. And the purpose of it is to get rid of, just like we get rid of capital against worker by doing what? By eliminating the monopoly on property. Now we eliminate the monopoly on empowering work, which hasn't been done before as a conscious effort. Now, Thatcher, back in the corner again, thinks this is ludicrous. Why? Oh, I forgot to do Thatcher and income. I really am tired. Remind me to come back right to this spot. Thatcher, when we did income, said that's ridiculous. You can't remunerate for duration, intensity, and onerousness of socially valuable labor. If you do that, it will be catastrophic. Now, why does she say that? And you can't say because she's a schnuck. Why does she say that? What's her argument? Yeah? Make-believe, we're talking about medicine. What does Thatcher say? Nobody wants to be a doctor. That's what Thatcher and everybody else says. If you remunerate for duration, intensity, and onerousness of socially valued labor, how much does a doctor earn? Much, much, much less, right? Less than a coal miner, right? Yeah. And so she says that's a disaster because nobody will be a doctor and we'll all die. And if she's right, I have to start over because it doesn't do any good to have a morally sound economy in which everybody's going to die. So what's the answer to Thatcher? Okay, every one of you have probably heard this from economists, right? That you have to pay doctors a whole lot to motivate them to be a doctor. Right? Economists say that all the time. In the United States, when I give a talk, I'll have like 200 students, and I'll say, we remunerate this way. Thatcher's laughing. They immediately know why, instantly, because they hear it all the time. And they all think, who's the moron who invited this stupid speaker? Because this idiot speaker doesn't get it. And then we do a little experiment. And the experiment goes like this. You both just got out of high school, right? I don't know how you do France, but you just got out of high school. You were going straight to the coal mine, okay? Right into the coal mine. And you're going to earn, let's say, I don't know, 60,000 euros, okay, in the coal mine. You're going to college. And then you're going to medical school. And then you're going to be an intern. And then you're going to be a surgeon. And Thatcher tells us that to follow that disastrously debilitating and hurtful path, right, we have to pay you 600,000 euros, right? So to get you to go to college instead of the coal mine, and medical school instead of the coal mine, and to be an intern instead of the coal mine, we have to then give you 600,000 euros a year for the rest of your life as a surgeon. That's what they are telling us, right? So with those students, I just always do a little test. I'm going to start lowering your salary, okay? You tell me when you're going to forgo college and everything else and go into the coal mine because I'm paying you too little. 600, 500, 400, 300, 200, 100, 80, 60, 50, you're not sure. You're a little quicker than the US. The US invariably, and it's incredible because 2 minutes before, everybody in the room is absolutely certain that I'm crazy. And then 2 minutes after, the person is asking me, how low can I live on? Thus revealing the accurate truth that they don't want to be in that coal mine, quite smartly. So much for economics. Now we're back to the balanced job complexes. What does Thatcher say is wrong with balanced job complexes? Let's use the same place, the hospital. If we have balanced job complexes, right, if you're a surgeon now and we switch to a balanced job complex, in other words, you no longer do only empowering work, you now have to do a mix of empowering and disempowering, what do you wind up doing?
Bad surgery because you don't practice it enough. You do bad surgery because you don't practice your surgery enough and you spend too much time.
I have no idea what you're saying. Sorry.
You become a bad surgeon. You lose your skill.
No, wait, let's just see what job do you do? All right, so he's doing 40 hours of surgery a week now. We switched to balanced job complexes. So what is he doing in addition to surgery? He's cleaning bedpans or sweeping or something, right? And so let's say he goes down to 20 hours of surgery a week and bedpans and whatever, okay? So now Thatcher says what? Well, you're also a surgeon. What happened to you? You too went down from 40 to 20, right? And so did every other surgeon, and so did every engineer, and so did every accountant, and so did every lawyer, and so did every doctor, you know, and on and on and on. And what does Thatcher say? We're going to die. Once again, it's ethical. She might even give it to me that it's morally sound. Michael, it's morally sound, you know, you and Jesus, terrific, but we're all going to die, right? So you can't do it. There is no alternative, right? So that's what she would say. What's the answer?
You just educate twice as many surgeons.
But from where? From the 80%. Thatcher says, come on, quit this nonsense. They can't do it. That's what Thatcher says, they can't do it. So do a lot of people you know say they can't do it. How do you answer?
You take the people out of the coal ones, you need less doctors.
Yeah, but how do you answer when Thatcher says they're incapable of it?
They never tried.
Yeah, and Thatcher says, that's a pretty risky experiment you're doing there. If you're wrong, we're all dead. Thatcher's not totally a wimp, right? She's not going to roll over. She's right. Everybody can't be a surgeon, so she's right about that. But you don't need everybody to be a surgeon. You just need, from the 80%, enough people to learn surgery to replace you and him, right? All right, here's the way I try and answer. First off, I say, imagine a stadium in the United States 50 years ago. It's full of all the surgeons in the United States. What do you see? Answer? White men. And you ask the white men in the stadium, why are there no women? Why are there no blacks? Why are there no, you know, and you ask that, and what answer do you get? They can't do it, right? Nobody says, they're not in here because we don't let them in. They're not going to say that. They're not even going to say they're not in here because structural conditions in society have prevented it. They say they cannot do it. And in fact, if you ask a lot of them, a lot of the women and the blacks, why they aren't in there, they'll say the same thing 50 years ago. Okay, so now we know it was nonsense. How do we know it was nonsense? Because right now, American medical schools are 51% women. So there goes that hypothesis down the drain. The claim is, and the claim you need to be able to argue, is that classism is quite analogous to racism and sexism. It's just the reason why the 80% appear to be incapable of doing it is the same as the reason why women appeared to be incapable of doing it. You could imagine a universe in which women were biologically incapable of doing it, and the result would be they weren't doing it. But that isn't our universe. They are capable, they were just destroyed by institutions. Same for working people. Okay, so we'll just bypass that. So now we have balanced job complexes. So now in our workplace, now we'll switch to Yugoslavia. So now we're in the market socialist system, and now we have the Workers' Council, equitable remuneration, balanced job complexes. They didn't quite have that, but let's make believe they did. And a market for allocation. What does a market for allocation mean we have to do? Well, first of all, in our self-managed council, we're going to make some decisions. Are we going to decide to have daycare? Sure as hell hope you are. Are we going to turn on the air conditioning so we don't have to breathe nasty fumes? Are we going to clean up the garbage that we drop in the neighborhood? Yeah. Are we going to, and then there are lots of other things. Maybe we'll have somebody telling stories like they used to do in Cuba. Actually, they still do, while we're doing work, to entertain us. And maybe we'll have a library and so on and so forth. Okay. Now we have to function within a market in Yugoslavia. What happens? Well, you mean those choices? Well, but why can't we just spend on that? Huh? So what happens if we make all those choices? We get outcompeted, and when we get outcompeted, we close, and now we have the wonderful, humane workplace, except for one minor problem. We don't have any work. So we're out of work, but ethically sound. Not so good. And this is real. That is to say, there are all sorts of problems with markets, and I'm not going to go into all of them. But one of them that's most subtle is this one, that markets impose decisions. So we now confront a nasty situation. We have to get rid of the daycare. We have to turn the air conditioning off, or at least most of it. We'll see in a minute. We have to let the fumes go through the air. We have to dump stuff on the neighborhood, because otherwise we're losing our surplus, we're losing our ability to compete, and we're going to go out of business. Are we going to be good at making those decisions? Terrible, right? We would be absolutely atrocious at making those decisions. So we all sit around and we figure, we better get somebody to help us make those decisions. So where do we go to get somebody? This is what they did in Yugoslavia. Where do we go? Well, you can't look under a chair. Where do you go? Much more specific than America. You don't have to go to America. There are other places you can go. Where do you go?
Harvard Business School.
Exactly. But you could also go to Oxford or Cambridge or wherever. Why? Because those institutions teach people not only how to make the decisions, but how to not give a shit about the pain that it causes others. And therefore, that's what we need. So now we go and hire somebody like that. You know about it. You must be there. So we're going to go and hire you, right? So we hire him, and do we give him a balanced job complex? No, that defeats the whole purpose. We put him in an office. We turn on the air conditioning in your office. We let you put your feet up on your desk. And on the way out, we say, okay, now go ahead and screw us. Because that's what we need in the market system in order to do okay. Okay, so we can't have markets. And we also can't have central planning. And the reason we can't have central planning is because it's authoritarian, and the authority figures at the center want authority figures in the factory, and there goes the coordinator class back into power.
But how do we abolish markets?
Well, that's a big question, but you see, you're the one who gave the title, right? And I don't see anything in there about how do we reach Paricon. That would have been another story. So you can blame yourself for that one. Okay, now suppose we look at participatory economics from the point of view of class. We got rid of the owning class and we got rid of the coordinator class. So we've, I believe, got classlessness. It's not socialism as we've known it in the past. You can call it participatory socialism, fine with me. But we don't want to confuse it with the thing that was called market socialism or centrally planned socialism. Because those economies not only had a coordinator class, but the coordinator class was the ruling class. And for those of you who have a deep affinity for Marxism-Leninism, Marxism-Leninism is the ideology of the coordinator class, not the working class. Right? And that's by Marx's own approach to the topic. He says, don't listen to what people say they are. Look and see what the theory hides, what the theory reveals, and what the theory does. It hides the existence of this class, right? Marxist discussion does not name a class between labor and capital. It hides the possibility of that being a ruling class, and yet it leads to it over and over again. It doesn't mean every Marxist-Leninist wants to be in a class-divided society, but it does mean that the ideology has that outcome. All right, now we're up to IOPS. How much time I got? Not much. It's 5 of 8.
We have another hour.
All right. Be careful. Be careful what you ask for. Okay, so what's the role of a revolution? I mean, we can do two things now. I can just go jump into IOPS, so you can ask some questions if you have them about participatory economics. Oh, I didn't say the alternative to markets. The alternative to markets is participatory planning. I'm not going to do it at any length because it would take too long, but it's not that complex. The idea is workers and consumers councils, right, engage in a process to arrive at a determination of inputs and outputs. In central planning, the process is top-down instructions. In markets, the process is competitive buying and selling. In participatory planning, the process is a cooperative negotiation. Now, you have to demonstrate that this kind of cooperative negotiation, with the various features that you need, will arrive at a conclusion that has the attributes that you want, but that's what the books do. So I won't do that for now. So, do you want to ask questions about Paracon, or do you want to slide into IOPS and then ask any questions you have at the end? Seeing no response, I will proceed. Okay. Two different questions. Two different questions. People who can't work just get a full income plus medical stuff, right? That's not really very radical, actually, when you get right down to it, right? Even social democrats do that. Now, people who don't want to work. Well, then that's an interesting question, and there are different attitudes about that, and I'll tell you mine. Mine is fuck off, right? That is to say, I don't think there's anything radical whatsoever about an able-bodied person saying, I want income and I don't want to work, right? And they're perfectly entitled to do that. They can just go off and live by themselves without electricity, without water, without roads, without food, prepared by other farmers, et cetera, et cetera. And they're not going to choose to do that. They're going to choose to have a balanced job complex and be part of the economy. But there's some people who, for some reason, who think that it's radical to say that it's appropriate to get income even though you do nothing.
What about from the cradle to the grave?
Well, there's no such thing in a Paracon. Absolutely not. And there wouldn't be any such thing in our system either if, when there is not enough work, you simply reduce the length of the work week. Right, there goes unemployment. Right? So it's not complicated. In a participatory economy, as we have more productive, this is a worthwhile example. In the mid-1950s, it was called the golden age of capitalism. That's sort of what it was called. And in the United States, the per capita output, so in other words, the size of the social pie per person was like this. Okay? In 1995, 40 years later, because of technological innovation, the size of the pie per person, the per capita output, was almost exactly twice as much, right? So you could have maintained the quality of life and the conditions and the income availability of the golden age of capitalism and worked 1 week on and 1 week off, right? Or 3 days a week, and so on and so forth. Actually, 2.5 days a week. But we didn't do that. Instead, we worked longer. There was fewer vacations, longer hours, et cetera, et cetera. And now the question becomes, who made that decision? And the answer, I won't beat around this, is no one. That is, no individual made that decision. The market system made that decision. Here's one of the places that Marx was quite right. He used to say, accumulate, accumulate. I know this because I used to hear him say it. Accumulate, accumulate, that is Moses and the prophets. And what he was saying is under capitalism, there's a pressure and a drive to accumulate. That's the thing that we saw with markets, forcing competition. And that drive to accumulate is perpetual. And on the same token, the drive to maximize profits is perpetual. So what happened between 1955 and 1995 is that all that extra wealth went overwhelmingly to the 20% and the 2%, and not everybody else, even though length of workday increased. Right? It couldn't be any more ridiculous. All right.
What's your opinion on the welfare state cradle to grave?
Again, if you're talking about compared to what we have, terrific. If you're talking about compared to a participatory economy, it's meaningless, right? There's no need to even think about it. In a participatory economy, if you can't work, you don't work, you get income. If you can work, you work. The income you get is fair and just and ample. Your conditions are desirable, and so on and so forth, right? All right, what's the implication for schooling of a participatory economy? Think balanced job complex. What's the implication of that for schooling?
Different skills and diversity of skills.
Right, so let's ask the question slightly differently. We have 20 and 80, 20% and 80%, coordinator class and working class. So what's the implication of that for the school system?
Well, 80% stops if it's 16, 80% all the time.
Yeah, but it's not just 80%. Well, if you remember being in high school and the end of the day is coming, right? And the clock it's 5 to 3. And let's say the day ends at 3. So it's 5 to 3 and the clock's moving and you're looking at the clock. Yeah, see? You're already smiling. You're looking at the clock and you can't wait for the damn thing to get straight up and down so you can get the hell out of there. And you just can't wait, but you sit there. Yeah? You do sit there. And you learn the two things that schools exist to teach the 80%. You learn to take orders and to endure boredom. The two most crucial things for 80% of the population to be acclimated to. And then, if you don't remember this, you were over here headed for the 20%. You were getting channeled into the 20%, and you were in better circumstances. One more example like that. After the 60s, in the United States, the ruling class, the ruling elites, said, good Lord, we don't ever want to see that again. This was a disaster. This was serious. This was really dangerous. So they are serious. So we need to try and figure out what structurally contributed to the 60s so we can change it. So the Trilateral Commission did this. So they set up this big commission to investigate. And they come back with an answer, a bunch of silly answers, and one that was quite interesting. The interesting answer was, the problem was we were overeducating people. Sputnik happened, and because Sputnik happened, we went berserk. And we started pouring money into education because we were afraid the Russians were going to trounce us. So we were pouring money into education, and the trouble was people were getting out of high school and they expected to have a life. And that was horrible. That's the problem. They encountered a world in which, of course, they weren't going to have at least a good life, and they had confidence enough and desires enough. They didn't think it was inevitable that they had to suffer like that, and they rebelled. And so what do we have to do? And now they play hardball. They said, well, what we have to do is jack up tuition tremendously at any place that's going to produce. We have to change the distribution of wealth, the distribution of government assets to schools, so that in the good neighborhoods, pour it in, and in the bad neighborhoods, take it out. So that we don't have, see, before that, they just wanted smart population. And they were smart enough to know that you put the money in the poor neighborhood, you get smart people too, right? But afterwards, they realized they don't want to do that because they were getting too many smart people, too many educated people, so they take the money out. And then you increase vocational schools. Vocational schools are places where you go to school in the equivalent of a factory floor. Very loud, right? Very, well, you have to, anyway. Okay, so we're on to IOPS. So why do you need a revolutionary organization? Why can't you just have Occupy spring up and free the world, right? Or something else? Why do you need organization? And the answer, I think, is partly you need it to share analysis, vision, and strategy. Because if you're going to create a new world, and it's going to involve people participating, everybody in a position to have an opinion, everybody in a position to voice their preferences, then people have to understand what the hell is going on. People have to know what it is they're trying to achieve. They can't just be following a banner. If they follow a banner, they're going to follow it right off into coordinatorism. So they need to be able to partake. And to partake means to possess strategy and vision. So that's one thing you need it for. And by the way, that says something. That says that if anybody ever gets in front of you and has a book on vision and says they want a society that's equal and where people participate, and you look at the book, and the book is written in hieroglyphics. In other words, the book is all these ridiculously fancy words and sentences that go on, until you fall off the page. They're lying. They're either lying or they're delusional, one or the other, because that does not contribute to what they say they want. That just makes people feel stupid. And there's no reason for it other than to aggrandize themselves and look smart, right? And distinguish themselves from other people, even though they're not smart. That's the big irony of it. All right, so you need it to develop and pursue shared program, both internally and with others, so that you can develop program and so that you can't win a new society overnight. It takes time. You need it to learn lessons and preserve them, so people don't have to start over and over again. And you need it to serve the membership so that it stays with the process. Before the Iraq War, 12 million people demonstrated against it. I don't know how long later, 6 months later, that number was down to a few 100,000. That is certainly the most important fact for the left in the past, I don't know how many years, many decades. That was international. But now I'll give you where I first thought about this. I was sitting on a panel at a Green convention, Green Party convention, and I was supposed to give a presentation, and others were too. And the others were talking. I wasn't talking yet. And I was bored. What they were saying didn't interest me. And so I started daydreaming. I'm just telling you the truth. If you think people sit on these panels and are paying attention to each other all the time. Anyway, so I was daydreaming, and I had a thought. My thought was this. How many people from 1965, and this was 1995, from 1965 to 1995, 30 years, right, had come into the vicinity in some significant way of the American left, right? And so who is that? Well, it's certainly everybody in the 60s who was involved. Everybody in the anti-war movements, that one and subsequent ones. Everybody in the gay liberation movement. Everybody in serious labor movement. Everybody in the women's movement. Everybody, shitload of people. Everybody who took a course from radical faculty were in the vicinity of the left for an extended period of time. So all of them too. So a very, very conservative number was 10 million. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, we're supposed to be the good people. We're supposed to be the caring people. We're supposed to be the sympathetic people and the people who can relate and who can talk and so on. So shouldn't our movement be sticky? Shouldn't it be the case that when you come into the vicinity of our movement, you're attracted ever more strongly? It's like gravitation. It's sticky because we're the good people and we have the good cause and so on. And then I asked myself, and by this time I was close to falling out of the chair, I asked myself, okay, if we were sticky, where would we be at now? And the answer was, most of those 10 million, a very conservative number, would still be in the left. And most of the people who they would have organized over a span of 30 years would still be in the left. So we'd have 60 million leftists in the United States. That's when I fell off the chair. Because then I realized, why didn't it happen? It wasn't because the other side has a lot of guns. It wasn't because the media lies to us. It wasn't because the school system sucks. It wasn't any of that. It's because we're incompetent. Now, it's actually good news. It's not bad news, even if it's a little depressing at first hearing. It's good news because if we weren't incompetent, it would be hopeless, right? Because it would mean if we did the best you can do, then next time around you can't do better, right? You can't do better than we did, right? My generation was the best. That's a disaster. But the good news is we were horrendous. The bad news is nobody has done anything about it for 30 years. Nobody has even asked the question for 30 years, or very few have, right? So, and this is part of why you need a good organization. So it takes this stuff on head on instead of writing big words and, you know, making believe it's holier than thou. So, okay, so why? Why?
I have a question about the democratic centralism. Because
Back to that?
you're going to, you said you're
Yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up. So, come join the left. I'm a recruiter now, okay? So I'm recruiting for the American left. Come join the left. Risk your relations with your parents, right? Not you, but most. Risk your relations with your parents, right? Risk your relations with your friends. You might lose some of them, right? Risk your trajectory, your profession, your desire for a profession. You do this, your head may get muddled. You know, you'll get sucked out of the path you were in. Risk all that. Forget about risking police. You know, you don't even have to bring that up. Give up all that television that you used to get pleasure from. The only thing you can watch from now on is The Simpsons. How many of you watch The Simpsons? Hands up. There's no left audience anywhere in the world. I mean, the French are weird. There is no left audience anywhere in the world except apparently Paris where everybody's hand doesn't go up. Leftists, I cannot explain this one. Leftists watch The Simpsons. But they don't watch, you know, dramas and all kinds of things because they would be thought to be bourgeois, you know, hedonists or something. I don't even know. So you got to give that up. You know, give up sports. Forget about sports. I mean, in Europe, I think you can be a soccer fan, just barely. But in the United States, you cannot be a football fan. You cannot be a baseball fan. You cannot be a basketball fan. If you're going to be in the left community, you're going to take crap for doing that, so give that up. Okay, so what do we give you back? What do we give you back? Well, let's see. We give you a movement that doesn't know what it wants, that doesn't know how to get it, and long meetings. Okay, we're finished. And now we want to know why we have a hard time, right? It's not hard to figure out why and I didn't even mention that the left can feel more sexist than the world outside, and that the left can feel more racist than the world outside, and that the left, by and large, is more classist than the world outside. It doesn't just feel that way. It's grotesque, right? Maybe I need to prove that.
So in which case, come and join Respect.
What?
I said, in which case, come and join George Galloway's party, which is the most
Yeah, that would be...
left-wing radical party in the whole of Europe right now.
In the United... Well, how many of you have at any time thought to yourself, consider that guy who's lying on the couch for 6 hours on Sunday watching football. What a fucking waste. Hands up. Honesty now is the only revolutionary policy. You don't think of them at all? All right, you can put your hands up because that's just as bad. Okay? So now, when I do this with an American audience, every left hand goes up, right? Everyone. And they're laughing hysterically because they think I agree. And now I say, well, wait a minute. If it's such a waste of time, what should the guy have been doing instead? And I have to add, what should the gal have been doing instead? Because in the United States, sports fandom is now pretty evenly split between women and men. All right, but so what should the person be doing instead of watching football for 6 hours on Sunday afternoon? What do you think they say? What did you say?
going to a political meeting.
Come on, Americans aren't even that bad. What do they say? These are leftists. For the leftists, understand, if you go to a mall, you're excommunicated. Right? You're not allowed. Read a book is the second thing they say. What's the first thing? The first thing they say is, why don't you just play instead of being on the couch? You should play ball, right? So that's the first thing they say, at least play. And what's the answer for why they don't play? Because there's no fucking fields to play on. Because for 40 years, the United States has, systematically obliterated any avenue for working people to interact together, right? That's policy. It becomes expensive and almost impossible. And I'm sure it's happened to a considerable degree in Europe. Generally, you lag a little bit behind the sewer pit country I come from. So the first thing they say is that, but that's impossible. And the second thing they say is read a book. And I ask, who should they read? And they say, they do not say Marx, they do not say Trotsky, come on. And they certainly don't say mine. If they did, I would say, okay, you're right. No. Chomsky, of course. They all say Chomsky, read Chomsky. And so I say, okay, let's examine it. Let's actually think. What you think you do all the time, let's actually do for just 2 minutes. We've done it now for already 2 minutes. We do it for 2 more minutes. What happens if the guy reads Chomsky on Monday? And now they get smart. Well, he can't talk to his friends. Correct. You can't go to the water fountain and talk to anybody. So so far you've got him giving up his friends in order to not watch football, which he happens to like, by the way, on Sunday. I said, what else happens? Somebody else raises their hands. He's mad. I said, how mad? People look around. He's probably very mad. I said, is he mad enough to make a mistake and piss off his boss? Yeah, he might be. And lose his job? Yeah, maybe. So now in order for him to behave like you and not watch football on Sunday, you want him to give up his friends and risk giving up his income and screwing his whole family. And this is what we don't do. We don't think about the other person's situation and understand that in context, their choices make a whole lot of sense. Only in context. I know I'm supposed to be talking about IOPS, but I can't help myself. When I was in college, I had an economics professor, and he did this thing one day. He was sort of a poet. He was an okay poet. But in any case, one day, he says, consider this. He says, there's a butterfly at this end of the table. The table stretches all the way to down there. There's a butterfly here. And for the squeamish, cover your ears. I pull the wings off the butterfly, says Herb. And he says, is it rational? The butterfly wants to get down there. He says, is it rational for the butterfly to walk across the table to get down there? And he answers yes. And then he says, is it rational for the butterfly to walk across the table to get down there? And he says, no. And then he left the room because he's a poet. I won't do that. What he was driving at is, if we use as our norm some sort of objective norm, for instance, the future good society, it is, of course, absolutely and totally irrational for a butterfly to walk. Butterflies should fly, right? But if we consider the context of the butterfly, it is totally reasonable for the butterfly to walk, because the butterfly has no wings, so it's reasonable to walk. And his lesson was basically, we're all walking butterflies, almost all the time, right? Except we give ourselves allowance, and we don't think it's crazy that we hold jobs as wage slaves, right? That's not crazy. It's crazy to sit on the couch on Sunday and watch football, but to hold a job as a wage slave isn't crazy, because that's me. I do that, therefore it can't be crazy, right? And all sorts of other things that we do, but the other guy, the other person who's in a different class, they're nuts. They are manipulated. They are dolts. They are foolish. The problem is not understanding. How many people have seen Saturday Night Fever? Not too many. Well, I won't do this unless I get the right answer to this question. How many people think consumerism is a bad thing? Hands up. How many people think consumerism is in considerable degree a product of advertisements basically tricking us cajoling us into buying things that it makes no sense to buy and that it harms us that we do it, you know. Hands up? Okay, then I will do this. I don't think that's true. And I think it's exactly like the walking butterfly and the guy on the couch. And here's how this one goes. For those who saw Saturday Night Fever, well, sorry, I'll describe it for those who didn't, because this is the first time I began to understand this, assuming I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. A lot of people think I'm wrong. In Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta plays a disco dancer. And he's great in the movie. I recommend the movie. And every weekend, he buys a new shirt, okay? And he's a working-class guy, poor, and he spends a considerable portion of his income on a new shirt, which he wears on Saturday Night Fever, and then he throws out, right? And, of course, that seems like the height of consumerist lunacy, right? But it's not. Because what is he doing? He is trying to get status, he is trying to get dignity, and he's trying to get a relationship and a sex life, right? He's trying to do all those things, and he succeeds frequently, right? And he doesn't have another path to do it. So here's the thing about advertisements. They are infinitely worse than any of you believe. And the reason is because they're telling the truth. They're not lying. When the advertisement says, buy this stuff, some of them are ridiculous, but when the advertisement says, buy this stuff to get dignity, buy this stuff to get a better sex life, buy this stuff to get friends, buy this stuff to get freedom, status, whatever you want, and that's always what it is, right? They never lie in the transparently obvious way. Buy this to grow 8 inches, right? Don't do that, you know. Use the toothpaste and you will become, Mr. America. You don't see that ad. You see the ad, use the toothpaste and you'll have relationships. Well, just try not using toothpaste and see what chance you've got. Right? The truth is that the society is so constructed, right, that the avenue, the rational avenue, not irrational, the rational avenue, short of dramatic transformation of society, to these types of fulfillment is through commodities. So the ads are really, it's not so much that they're getting us to buy, they're getting us to buy one brand instead of another, mostly because we see it more. But the desire to buy makes sense anyway. Anyway, it's worth thinking about. I believe this is another example of classism, because I believe most of us, when we think in terms of consumerism, don't think in terms of ourselves, and we tend to think of people in other classes, and to ignore the context that they find themselves in.